Today on LiftoffPM, we're going to talk about 6 components to an AI product manager job. This is a very complex yet hot role today. So we're going to cover the main traits of being an artificial intelligence product manager, what your roles and responsibilities will be, and how you can prepare for the role to have impact across all parts of the product. And we're going to cover from product strategy and prioritization, to metrics, to data, to ethics and trust and safety, to user experience, and to execution. So Selena from the LiftoffPM team is an AI PM herself, and we also interviewed other AI PMs to provide you with the most relevant information. But first, I do want to share with you that we have many more product management lessons to help you land your dream job that we want to share with you in our paid course. Just hit the link at the top of the description to see them all, including how to answer product sense, execution, strategy, and behavioral questions. There are a lot of interview prep materials out there, many of which are outdated or contain generic advice. The Liftoff PM course has the latest topics and most strategic ways to answer today's PM interview questions so that you can stay focused on what works. So hit join and unlock all the videos on our course to ace your interview. And in doing so, support the extensive writing, filming, research, and editing here at LiftoffPM. Our course has helped over 90 people land PM roles at FAANG and top startups, and we're really proud of that. So now let's dive into what it's like being an AI PM. Product strategy and prioritization. A common challenge in research is aligning academic interests with product goals. While there's projects that can be technically fascinating and can be readily pursued, they might not always align with the broader market. So for example, there's always been a huge trend in building look-alike avatars of yourself, but how many of you would actually use that feature on a day-to-day basis? And sometimes research in tech is fun, but not durable, and AI PMs are here to make sure that teams maintain focus on solving real-world user needs and not just shipping flashy technology. There's also tension between keeping up with the competition in the near term, as well as placing longer-term research bets. So should your team resources be spent on trying to fast follow with the competitor's features, or should you be taking the hit now and trying to leapfrog into a larger launch later? These are the kind of questions you'll be facing. Metrics. Not only are you going to be responsible for the definition and evaluation of traditional success metrics like engagement, retention, monetization, but you're also going to be responsible for the definition and evaluation of model quality. For example, you need to set the quality bar for a ML or AI model. For some teams, this has to be a manual process where you're grading outputs side by side. For other teams, you can try to automate the process by having a separate grader model to rate the outputs. And of course, many teams use a hybrid approach. Your success metric might be something like a percentage of participants in a study who rated an AI-generated output as same, better, or worse than your control. You also need to set the trust and safety quality bar. You can try approaches such as red teaming, where ad hoc teams adversarially test your product and try to break it, and you can use these outputs of the test to improve your model. Or structured scaled evals, where you create a set list of inputs that you test offline on candidate models, and this would save a lot of manual testing time as well. Once the candidate model is run, you can view the outputs against your policies and or quality bar to see if the candidate model is an improvement or not. A real life example might be, let's say you have a customer service bot that uses generative AI to generate responses. You would want to create some data sets that covers basic use cases like a customer asking for a refund, or not being able to log into a customer's accounts, or a customer having an emotional reaction to something that you said. So then you would want to run new models against these test examples and assess how your new models performed against dimensions that you'd come up with like coherence or accuracy. Data and its impact on the product. So the underlying data set that you use is going to be critical to success because it directly influences the model's ability to make accurate predictions. High quality, diverse, and representative data will enable the model to generalize well. This is one of the biggest blockers to getting started on AI projects. If you don't have the right data, you can't get started training a model. So here's an example. Let's say Samsung launched a reflection removal feature to remove glare from pictures of windows and glass. And this is what I would imagine PMs on their teams did to build the feature. First, they would gather diverse images with reflections and corresponding images where reflections are removed. Then they would use both existing datasets and custom collected images with controlled reflections. Next, they manually removed or masked reflections in the images to create label data. And since this sort of data is likely pretty scarce, like there aren't many examples of glass with and without reflections, they might need to augment the data in other ways. They could create synthetic reflections using 3D rendering or other techniques to expand the data set. Ethical and trust and safety challenges. So compared to traditional software development, AI PMs work much closer with cross-functional partners in trust and safety, privacy, and legal. For trust and safety, having a strong relationship with your trust and safety counterparts is critical to having successful launches at scale. Jointly, PMs and trust and safety leads should tease apart nuances in policy. You need to have tricky conversations. Imagine an image generation product. Are guns allowed in valid outputs? If yes, in what scenarios? What about people in swimsuits? Is that a true P0 violation if these things happen? And these are all very important because once you've aligned on the policies, you can work with research and engineering teams to fine-tune the models to prevent the P0 policies you've identified. Privacy and legal will also be very involved in the dataset, how it was collected and how it was trained. And also fairness. So fairness is a different counterpart or a different stakeholder than trust and safety. Trust and safety usually deals with harmful behaviors like security threats and user protection, while fairness deals with equity, impartiality, and avoiding discrimination. AI PMs need to consider if their models are fair. A classic example is making sure that female and male representation is equitable when asking generative AI to generate a picture of a doctor. User experience. So here you have to handle randomness. Because the tech that we use is inherently non-deterministic, meaning that you're going to get something different each time, you have to bake that into the design. So you can also try to make this into a feature, not a bug. For example, in many image editing generative AI products, like Google Photos, you'll be offered multiple results, and then you can pick one that's your favorite. Latency. Latencies are also much longer in generative AI products than traditional features. Products that try to decrease the perceived latencies by setting better expectations on how long things will take usually do better. For example, when processing is happening, maybe you can add fun haptics or animations. Technical risk and limitations. So because the generative AI technology is risky, product teams intentionally de-scope big parts of functionality. For example, Google's Gemini does not edit photos of humans at all. PM and UX teams should set expectations upfront with users on big gaps in functionality, and when they can't, they need to know how to fail gracefully. UX teams also usually make sure that the experimental nature of the product is highlighted front and center in the designs, and that there's a seamless feedback mechanism. And when possible, try to bake in explainability for users to understand how a result was generated. Execution. Developing AI models is inherently iterative. Traditional software teams iterate, but it is typically more predictable than with AI. For example, once you deploy and integrate a model, you may want to try a distilled or faster model, or you may need to work with back-end teams to host and deploy model iterations. Infrastructure and cost. So running computation-heavy AI models is expensive, as is the hardware infra needed to run things. As a PM, you need to make sure that you've not only secured the proper resources, but also have made trade-offs of how much power is enough. Meaning, you could make a super high-quality model, but maybe an 80% as powerful model is just as good. So here you would need to make this kind of quality versus cost choice. De-risking models. Sometimes, product teams need to bet on multiple models and research teams, since research progress is sometimes spiky. If you put all of your eggs into one basket, you might end up with nothing. Or you might end up with a faster breakthrough. If you keep multiple horses in a race, you de-risk having a viable model, but you split your resources. So as a PM, It's more an art than a science in knowing when to cut off potential branches and double down on a single launch candidate. So in summary, being an AI PM differs from being a traditional PM in a few ways. Your design considerations need to account for inherent unpredictability, for higher latency, and in general, setting user expectations for what the product can and cannot do. AI PMs will also work much more closely with trust and safety, privacy, and legal teams compared to traditional PMs. Trust and safety counterparts also are super important because they help you steer the research and engineering teams in the right direction while fine-tuning models. Privacy and legal peers will help consult with what data is being used and how it's being used. And execution will be inherently more iterative and sometimes more unpredictable. Infrastructure and cost considerations are also more important to an AI PM, as well as how to de-risk model development. Sometimes it's more an art than a science. And in addition to defining traditional PM success metrics, you'll also need to define and evaluate quality and trust and safety metrics. There's many tactics to do evals like red teaming and structured evals. Part of flexing your strategy and prioritization muscles includes navigating the tension between what tech is ready and or flashy with what use cases will remain durable and actually needed in the market. Lastly, data is the center of everything, and the scope of what data PMs need to consider increases immensely. If you don't have a good data set, the feature is doomed. All right, and that's the video. So I hope this was helpful in helping you understand what an AI PM does. And if you're looking to ace your PM interviews, click the join button below to try one paid course or access the full LiftoffPM course through YouTube memberships. There are a lot of courses on the internet, many of which are outdated or contain generic advice. The LiftoffPM course has the latest, most comprehensive topics, and also most important strategies so that you can stay focused on what works in your interview prep. And we'll see you in our next video.